You know, history is something that a lot of people study out of humankind, but there's a lot of people that don't. I can empathize with both sides of which because during my life, during important times, I had to actually set this all aside and do things that were important, like become a parent or things like that. And it was really only something that I caught at a glance because I wouldn't watch news and things, and a lot of this never would come out on news, to where I would get a little glance at something that happened, and that one thing kicked me off into making connections with how that works out with what I had already found out from before, and it leads to a total new thing. And that leads to another thing, and so on. And I would get to the point that I feel like I had that all figured out. Here's the piece of the puzzle. This is the way it fits. This is the way that it fits in. And then what I would do is pretty much close the book. But a lot of times I had that book sitting right there and would think about it and go back through it, of course, during very boring times and things like that and stuff. But I was trying to be a good husband and a parent, and all those things were trying to be evident. But I kept finding out certain things that would show up. And one thing that actually I was dreaming of my whole life of somehow happening ended up happening, and it changed it all. It literally broke history. It took the narratives that people were saying and had been saying all my life, and it just threw them out the door. A lot of people ran out the door and tried to save that, and you find this strange apologetics going on in the meantime, that there's all this information that's out there that shows you that no, that's bullshit. Long ago we figured out all that, and we figured out this. You wouldn't believe the number of people that I've talked to that have no idea that the Sumerians had advanced mathematics, that they had things that even to a modern day we're taught other people much later in history had figured out. Whether they went in the Library of Alexandria and figured it out, or things like that and so on, and led back through the Greeks that we know of. And all these things are attributed to certain people that found out certain things. Even Eratosthenes finding out that the world was round, and then he measured it by being able to figure out that a well in Syene shows no shadow at all, and they plumbed that thing exactly vertical. And then where he was, there was about an 8-degree difference, and figuring out that distance that he had of 8 degrees of 360 degrees, he got a basic idea of the size of our Earth. And actually, that's not true, for it had already been figured out long before that. And symbolically, people would say things like 4 corners of the earth, but if you look at the map and the way things were going at that time, they were literally saying down here, up over there, over here, and down there. You can stick a square sticker on a ball, and it works out, but it starts to get contorted and twisted, and you're going to end up with wrinkles in it or whatever, and you have to cut those lines into it. That's because of a bulge of the earth. It gets incredibly weird up toward the poles, and everything squinches in. That's not for the realm of this video that I'm talking about, though, but somehow I felt myself just going off in left field and having a nostalgic moment of how these things have all come to be, and how during this time I've somewhat been alone this whole time inside myself, a human on this planet, having to decipher and pick apart things from little statements that other people say and so on, that goes with this or goes with that. Or they find the Dead Sea Scrolls eventually, and you go through that and you find out the reality of what was going on then. and Gnostic teachings and so on that actually led to our current Bible we have today, and the way that this all worked out versus the way that a lot of people have been told. You wouldn't believe the amount of people that I've spoken to, including my brother, who is up on things, seriously, but not in this realm, because he's a deacon of a church and he's not going to sit and watch movies about how Christianity isn't real. I mean, let's get real about that. But he's looked at a lot of stuff, and of course apologetics and things like that, and he's got enough of that it just covers him. I, on the other hand, did not have that, and I didn't get indoctrinated to the point that I'm stuck. And I found myself trying to study all the ancient cultures around it. And in part of this, through my studies on and off as a youngster, I was doing it to try to find out something new I could add to a Dungeons and Dragons campaign where there are these ruins, like what we started off with looking at there. But at those ruins, there was this stone people didn't realize could be lifted and almost looks different than the others, just slightly. Hey, roll an intelligence check, we open it up, and then there's magic things and a whole dungeon set up under it. We don't even know, and may not ever know because of the way we do things, that these things are in effect. And even though we find these ancient temples and stuff, right below it might have been something that actually shows a trapped time capsule of the time that it was actually buried. It's amazing that the Egyptians did what they did with their bodies to be able to show us who they actually were in ancient times, where this all comes from, how this is all connected and things like that. It is amazing, all the things that I keep going through, and it keeps me going. If I can find one little thing to add to my puzzle, I don't make videos about most of them because it's like, nah. But I just file that away, and next thing you know, if I can get 2 or 3 things attached to it, or if there's something that's real important that I know might attach to it, I'll try to find an attachment. Next thing you know, here goes a video, and we go down a rabbit hole, right? I can't count the number of people I have explained Gobekli Tepe to and then just act like, look it up, or whatever, just so I can show you something that you didn't know. It's this one thing that actually destroys history as the way that you think of it, because a lot of these people, whenever I talk to them, I can evaluate pretty good. Hit them with a few things or whatever if we get into the conversation at all. It's not like I walk up to people and go, hey, you know about Gobekli? No. Start talking about things, and I'll make a mention here and there, and they'll ask a couple of questions, and I'll go off on it, and then I'll mention Gobekli Tepe or something if it gets back to ancient sites or when people were where, or it might have to do with the idea that the world was 4,000 years old or something, and you're like, okay, I can kind of realize where you're at. All these valuations get made, but you wouldn't believe how many people didn't know Gobekli Tepe exists. And it gets so much more huge, but just keep that thought in your mind right now. Nobody knows that a place that's built like Stonehenge, with ancient archaeoastronomy, hooked up to stars, hooked up to the path of planets, hooked up to ancient zodiacal symbols and everything else, were actually relief cut, bas relief on these flattened, squared T-pillars that have all of this knowledge that could be found all in it. And it's somewhat of a boon and a tragedy, because once we found it, it's so important. They somehow have decided the edict, especially with the man that was running it passing away, that people kind of posthumously went with the idea of, okay, we're going to leave this alone at this point. And we're not even going to know if it goes back earlier with all these other ones that are buried that we know, because they've uncovered quite a few of these. We'll take a look at that in a minute, but in doing so, they're actually leaving the other part alone. And one would think that things go towards the apex of that mound might mean something, and there might even be a layer of things that happened there, and we might be going back another 5,000 years more. You see, this site took and added well over 5,000 years to our idea of when people were Neolithic or building anything like this. It also destroys the idea of, well, people started coming up with astronomy here and they named the planets after the gods right here, because no, this was all going on. This is not popcorn, as I talk about quite often in my videos. This is something that went on. And it went on before. And this comes from this and comes from this. And if you want to go back through that mist, I try to help take you there a little bit. I can't show everything. It's all gone. If there was a car sitting in the middle of Gobekli Tepe, it would have rotted away now to where even its engine and everything else would nothing be more than a reddish ochre smear on the ground of oxides. No telling the things that we could find up under the dunes that are in the western desert of Egypt, where people were before they consolidated down on the Nile. I've recently went back over scrolls and have actually just watched some videos of people who are way deep into all the scrolls and trying to find out finally, what are all those things that stand out that are different than the Bible, and what does that show us? What are they not telling us? They always want to tell us they have this Isaac thing in here and it's pretty close to the original, or the one that we call the original, and so and all these things, but they don't mention, here's this book that says all this weird stuff. If you hear about it, you hear about that there was these Gnostics, and this is supposed to be something that's not attached to the religion somehow, and not the actual Gnostic type people that were coming up with this in the first place. And we got a variation of a theme going on, and it fit well, and people agreed upon it. And then it built. And then people went through the Council of Nicaea and built upon it again and agreed upon certain things. And that's what we're under today, thousands of years later, believe it or not. And as I look through from there to a modern time, I find that it has totally been picked apart. But the people, again, like people that don't know about history or these ruins or Gobekli Tepe or things like this, they don't even know. And I'm assured that if they did know, they'd have a total different outlook on the way things all happened. I think history is pretty important. In fact, after you're reading this, you're going to find out this is history. I made this video a couple of days ago and then edited it and put it out. It's part of history. But we're trying to go back into the times that in a modern day, we believe these certain things and the way that they went down. And I know some people avoid it because it shatters some of their ideas. But I'm one of those humans that want to find out the truth. And if the truth ends up telling me that this over here is a lie and this is the truth, then I have to go upon it. And that's led down a bunch of rabbit holes. I'll go more into the scrolls and what they show here in a little bit and everything, but what I'm trying to get at in one essence is quite far of a different thing. And you know, this predates the pyramids and Stonehenge, and it predates what we may know of as writing. Or here's another thought, they may have already had a form of writing, but they did it all on wood or vellum. Because if they did, it would all be gone now. Just a thought, but I'm pretty assured that they had symbols and things like that they went off writing with, and it was different, and that led to the ideograms that led to everything. It seems to fit right. We can find out a million things from Egypt, and I keep showing you them, and also who the people were at the time of the pyramids and these crystal blue-eyed statues and people that were at least the ones that were controlling nobility. And of course that bled down on the common population, and who actually were the other population that didn't have this. Genetics pops up and it goes, no, they had blue eyes. We're not going to say fair hair or not. It's possible due to this gene. But these other people definitely did. That's crazy. I think it's also crazy that, Egypt gets all the puff. Everybody watches Egyptian type stuff and everything, and it's more interesting, da da da. If you took those pyramids and you smoted them down flat, which might have happened building Giza and places like that from before, we would have a total different reverence. And if someone was to try to tell you that there's this thing on the ground here that shows us they used to have a pyramid that was this tall in ancient days and da da da, it wouldn't have the spark that it has, that it does, that we still have one of these wonders of the earth right here in front of us, and it's going to outlast all of us that are listening now and your kids, and keep going. And wouldn't it be nice if your kids and their kids were to find out things about Egypt and know about it more than, well, that's cool, they put a triangle on the ground, but what it means and more. And wouldn't it be neat if during their lifetimes, if it doesn't happen during ours that are listening now, that eventually they find that extra shaft and that extra area, and it, because no one knew about it, was actually untouched. And what can be found inside of that? Oh, there are dreams from Thoth's library to all kinds of things that go on. If there's something up there, it would be crazy if it just turns out to be a slot in the ground, just like the one below, and they used it for the mechanism to build the pyramid itself, and that's what builds the top point of it, and in between they use up slanting ropes and sleds and so on to get there. It still amazes all of mankind, and we're stuck on this, but hey, these Sumerians have a lot more to do with it than you believe. I got so stuck on it, I tried to veer away from it and now go back and keep touching upon it in a way, but we could roll back through it again. Irregardless of all this that we're talking about here, all of these places, literally every archaeological site other than Gobekli Tepe that you know about becomes overshadowed by something that is so important to humanity. I can't believe there's not more about it. And there's been some huff and puff, and now they're starting to build this whole thing for tourists, and all this goes on, which we're looking at here, where they got this giant potato chip right here below it here. But whoopsie, everything changed. It breaks history. It ends up showing you something, and things date back, and we're not even throwing a couple of 100 years on it or reaching for 1,000. We've got more than doubling the date of people doing this pre-Neolithic work. I know there are some people that say, well, I don't see a pyramid, therefore it's not quite as interesting. These are the people who ended up making the pyramids. Their ancestors. And believe you me, during this time, they were apexing on what they could do. There's a thought, too, that this happens right at the Younger Dryas event, and then because of that, they built these civilizations, got their shit back together, and then decided for some reason to bury it all. I've seen recent videos where they say, well, this part could be a landslide, this, that, and the other, and then they've had to come clean and go, that doesn't answer any of it, and it actually was all purposely buried. The other amazing thing people don't know whenever they talk about Gobekli Tepe is there's 11 other sites. And as they get excavated, I try to show you things about them, and I've gone a little bit gun happy here and shown a few things. And when we finally opened up the book about it and got down to the ground level, here are tables and tables worth of artifacts that they find in it, most of which were just smacked up and thrown in the till. It's not like they left the dinner table going. They took all that with them. And that's stonework that they made. And it's amazing, we find that these people are actually pre-pottery, Neolithic. So that flips the whole concept on its head too. It's amazing what all of this ends up showing us about how it really worked out versus what we thought that it went like, what they had going on. There are beadworks with little bitty beads being carved through them here at these places, over and above their cool artifacts and stonework that is showing you these people had a lot going on. And perhaps these are the lords of Arata that Sumerians talked about and revered so much, that had it going on in ancient times. Makes you wonder what happened in the middle of that to knock things down a notch. But it looks like what happened really is these people spread out and we ended up with variations on a theme. From down Sumer and going through there, but over the mountains, and then whoops, we're crept on the other side of the mountains and Zagros Mountains and down into India and all of those things are people that went up into China, heralded civilizations in all these spots, and down into Yemen, and down into Egypt and North Africa and across. And of course, they had always been from primordial times around the Mediterranean. When it got its name, they named it what comes out to be Middle Earth. That sounds like something out of Lord of the Rings, but we've also talked about recently how there was a genetic bottleneck at the Younger Dryas, and all these different people were around then and after, where we find that even Homo erectus species were still alive and extant at this time that we're talking about, and way after. Where did civilization all come from? I'm not built on the idea of gloating. People are trying to be humble. It's one thing that we cherish about ourselves is that we're pretty humble because we realize that there's something ahead too. Something coming up that's going to even humble that moment, because that's all that history shows. So Gobekli Tepe is this one site, and if you just went off the idea of this one site and the fact they've only got like 8 to 10% of it projected that they've got even excavated here, showing you all of these great pillars and things that go on, that destroys history right there in itself. But the fact that also people don't know usually is that no, this is not one thing where one thing happened, which is what people are trying to get pushed on the idea. At this time, there are 11 different hills that they've turned and excavated now, and they all have this going on in variations of a theme, and they can tell it's the same people. And now we have the largest archaeological complex that we know of in the ancient world, and look at the age of it versus any other place. And look at the fact that what we're really looking at is civilization was going on right after the Younger Dryas event. And this shows us that, well, this again, here we have this problem of it looks like popcorn. Just out of nowhere, they've got all this going on. Where were they just before that they got pushed to this point and restarted? That's another search. And somebody's going to find something someday. I wish it was sooner rather than later. What's amazing about this is you can come get up on this hill that's not been excavated really, at the top of it, where they've been covering it up with plants, kind of like the pyramids that are in China. They've been growing upon it. And then you look around you in a 360-degree view, and you will find a lot of mounds that kind of look conspicuously like the way this one looked when everybody thought it had nothing going on with it. They had literally written this off as some Byzantine type burial area or something, and some guy found a rock and they can't farm on it, and they're like, pfft. Well, luckily Schmidt, whenever he had been done in his other thing, he goes, I'm just going to take a look at it. This one's getting done here and almost finished, so I'll go over there and take a look. Oh my gosh. Just dig out this thing here real quick. What? Oh, there's a wall. Time out. Wow. It's almost unbelievable that people that don't even know this, and even whenever they see it, they don't even understand the breadth of what it actually shows and means to all of humanity and the way things went down. Here we're flying up on that potato chip. Looks like a Pringles, if you know what I'm talking about. Just sitting here with this thing down below it. Some of us say, you know, that it would erode from here with rain and wind damage and everything like that, but should we have it wide open to where at nighttime we can see what they saw the way they were seeing it, rather than having it covered up like this? You'd almost like to have this or like that. I guess if they're going to do a potato chip here, you know, they recreated a part of it over there in the museum in San Luirfa. So maybe they could find some way to project that on the ceiling or something there and give you an idea of what these people were going through. And they got it all set up there. I think it'd be incredible. They've turned this whole thing into what they call a tastepeller site, and it shows you the earliest civilization that we currently know, because all the other ones are based on thoughts and what somebody, when they were running from something or doing something, or a winter real hard, they lived in a cave or at one time or whatever. Well, where's the other dwellings? I mean, if this is the starting of stonework here, but it doesn't pop up like popcorn, there is stonework older than this. And then, you know, it's just kind of like the Three Little Bears, where apparently we started off making things out of brush and thicket and so on, but that got better and turned into where we're using wood and logs. And then these people started splitting those logs and doing things with it, making incredible houses and post holes and things that we have found back into Cro-Magnon days, but we can't guesstimate after that. And of course, to turn around and go, these are kind of square here and stuff, they could have been building houses here and it'd be long gone. You think you're going to find some petrified piece of wood or something like that going on. But this site right here started off the thing that made people decide to look under that little bump over there and, hey, there's one. Is there anything there? And archaeology starts running amok over here, and in a short period of time, during the time of the excavation of this one, they found 11 other sites. So it isn't even just this, oh, here's where it might have happened one time. These are civilizations right here all hooked up. It looks just like cities, just like in Sumer, down the runs and everything. The only thing there is there's not a river that's attaching these people. And being able to attach it that way. It's incredible. I can't wait to help expose what all comes out of it. I've done a recent video that shows this site, not this one, but another site that's been excavated as Gobekli Tepe. And well, here's the stuff they found out of it, or the small portion of it that they're going to go with. And are they going to stop and see if this is older than younger, older than younger? We're going to have to wait to the point, hey, some of these are older than Gobekli Tepe, and that just changes everything too. And then there's another idea that the part that's not excavated, is it older or is it younger? Are we going to hit, craps here every once in a while, or are we going to end up flipping the coin and getting it right one time and then finding the oldest of these? And when we dug the little portion we dug into and left it alone, that was actually the oldest, and we'll find out that this goes into the younger Dryas age, that it was already going on, or where did these people come from? Is there some other area? Maybe somebody could even look topographically at this whole thing and go, well, they must have come from this area or this area, and they probably wouldn't be going towards the mistake or the problem, so they must have been here or must have been there. And make those connections on who was who and what was what. I've done it in a feathered way, but we're going to get to the point that it's no longer in a feathered way. At some point, we'll be able to show it, and somebody's going to be able to quit having white hatred and just realize, okay, this is what happened and the way it all went. It's not really for this video, but one wonders what's up under that hill and what's under that ground. And of course, if you find some pillars and some things like that, you might be able to go off of it. Luckily, those got exposed just to the point that somebody said, let's take a look into this. I'm waiting for the next thing. They're going to find more and more of these tastepeller sites, and it's going to show you that it is gigantic. I'll do an overview on that and show you how you can fit like some of the big American states into that idea, and all the cities in the American states and stuff goes on that. And while there is a giant city that has a whole lot of people in it, those small to medium cities, that's about what's going on here. If we add it all together, how many people are there? I mean, we could be slight and say this and that and the other, but this is hooked up to an agricultural complex of people that apparently are in the tens of thousands here and here and here and here and here, and they know about each other. There's things going on with each other. And hey, this also attaches to the Natufians coming all the way down into the Levant and having built towers there and stuff, like at places like the walls of Jericho, as we call it today, and things that have been found there. And the amazing thing is they went on past that, but also out in the Black Desert. In the Black Desert, they built a whole lot of these stone round ruins and things like that to corral cattle and things into, that this place is a desert now and doesn't even look like it would have had wooded areas that would have made that happen. But that's how aged this place is and the way things used to be. In fact, if you'll look, they went down through Egypt all the way down, and you can find in the sub-Saharan Cape these same circles. And people were going crazy for a minute looking at it and saying, we find the date, here's humanity starting and everything. And then when they figured out those two connect each other and what this is going to show, they just kind of stopped. Have you heard about it? I'll make another video coming up. It'll be one of 40 or 50 that I've got just lined up ready to go. There's about enough of a rant on this, where this doesn't give enough credit, but when you look at the reality of it, it's the site that broke history, and now we're able to start looking back at things. And amazingly, I find that people think this is some far-fetched thought, and they go, no, it's on a tablet right here. They had trigonometry going on. And it's not rare. Here's another one. In fact, all these tablets where we didn't know what the hell was going on, they're doing this advanced math. Is there more? Yeah, there's a lot more. You know, they got credit for having all of these things that they developed, the Sumerians, but I'll find that didn't pop up inside a couple of generations like popcorn. It was brought to that area, and people already had it going on long before. Join me, won't you, as we explore through our 6th, 7th year now of this, and go deeper. I appreciate you. Leave comments down below. It drives me on. It brings about, well, you have a question, I might have an answer. Or actually this guy over here, and there's this paper here, and these things that go along with it, and then I'm going to talk about how that fits together with the web, because they won't talk about it, because they got to be ambiguous. Peace.